What if everything you knew about your family was built on a lie? What if the person who taught you about honor and legacy had built their entire life on deception? I never meant to discover the truth. It was supposed to be a simple afternoon, helping my grandfather clean out his attic before he moved to assisted living. The August heat made the cramped space feel like an oven, and dust particles danced in the strips of sunlight cutting through the rafters. My grandfather, weak from his recent stroke, sat in his favorite chair downstairs while I sorted through decades of accumulated memories. The box was pushed far back behind the Christmas decorations, underneath a moth-eaten quilt. It wasn't labeled, just a plain cardboard file box with a broken clasp. When I pulled it toward me, something about its weight felt significant, purposeful. Inside were manila folders, their edges yellowed with age, organized with the kind of precision that suggested someone had handled them many times. My hands trembled as I opened the first folder. Birth certificates, adoption papers, court records, all bearing my father's name. But the details were wrong. The parents listed weren't my grandparents. They were Michael and Anna Kowalski, names I'd never heard spoken in our house. Died in a vehicular accident, the documents stated clinically. Date of death matched when my father would have been 3 years old. I sat there on the dusty attic floor for what felt like hours, reading through every document. My dad, Richard Ashford, the man who never let us forget our prestigious family lineage, who insisted we maintain certain standards because of who we were, wasn't an Ashford by blood at all. He'd been adopted at 3 after his biological parents died. My grandparents had taken him in, given him their name, raised him as their own. But that wasn't even the worst part. Tucked between the legal documents were financial records, estate settlement papers, property deeds, bank statements. Michael and Anna Kowalski hadn't been poor. They'd left their 3-year-old son a substantial inheritance. A house in Chicago, savings accounts, family jewelry, and heirlooms. Everything liquidated when my father turned 18, converted to cash, reinvested into what he'd always called our generational family business. The business he'd built his entire identity around. The source of wealth he credited to Ashford ingenuity and business acumen passed down through generations. It had all started with Kowalski money. Money from the parents he never mentioned. Money from a family he'd erased. I couldn't confront him immediately. I needed to understand the full scope of what I found. Over the next few weeks, I became obsessed. I created a fake genealogy account and started searching for Kowalskis in the Chicago area. I found them everywhere. Aunts, uncles, cousins. A whole family tree my father had never acknowledged. I found Anna's sister, Margaret, still living in the same neighborhood where my father was born. Her social media was full of family photos, reunions, weddings, graduations. Conspicuously absent from every single one was my father. I sent her a carefully worded message, identifying myself as Richard's daughter. She called me within an hour, her voice breaking with emotion. "I've been trying to reach your father for 30 years, she said. After Michael and Anna died, we promised we'd stay in his life. But your grandparents, they made it difficult. And then when Richard turned 18, he cut us off completely. Margaret sent me everything. Boxes of letters she'd written over the years, all returned unopened. Birthday cards for my father, for me, for my siblings, all sent back marked return to sender. Photos from family gatherings where a place setting sat empty, saved hopefully for a nephew who never came. She told me about the restraining order my father had filed when she tried to visit him at his office 10 years ago. Harassment, he'd claimed. She just wanted to give him a photo album of his mother. Your grandmother Anna was my best friend, Margaret said, crying openly now. When she died, part of me died too. But I thought at least I'd have her son. I thought I could tell him stories about her, keep her memory alive for him. He was so young when it happened. I didn't want him to forget her face. I asked her what they were like, Michael and Anna. She painted a picture of 2 people I'd never known existed. Michael had been a high school teacher, passionate about history. Anna worked as a nurse and volunteered at a soup kitchen every Sunday. They'd been saving to buy a bigger house when the accident happened. A drunk driver ran a red light. They died instantly. At least they didn't suffer, Margaret said, though her voice suggested she'd repeated that phrase too many times to find comfort in it anymore. Michael and Anna weren't wealthy, Margaret explained, but they were careful. They wanted Richard to have opportunities. Anna's parents had left her some money, and they'd been saving since Richard was born. They wanted him to go to college, to have choices. They never got to see him grow up, but they tried to provide for his future anyway. The future my father had used to build a lie. I started noticing things I'd never questioned before. The way my father obsessed over genealogy, but only the Ashford side. The way he'd react with anger whenever anyone asked about his childhood. The elaborate stories he'd tell about Ashford family history, always vague on details details, always focused on reputation and status rather than actual people. At family dinners, he'd lecture us about legacy. The Ashford name means something, he'd say, looking pointedly at me and my sister. When people hear that name, they think of excellence, of tradition. You have a responsibility to uphold that. My sister Emily had hyphenated her last name when she got married. My father hadn't spoken to her for 6 months. You're diluting the family name, he'd told her coldly. Everything our family built, you're throwing away for sentiment. The irony was suffocating now that I knew the truth. He'd thrown away his actual family for a name that wasn't even his by birth. I found more evidence of his systematic erasure campaign. He'd hired lawyers to seal his adoption records, paying extra to have them classified as confidential. He'd contacted genealogy websites, threatening legal action if they didn't remove connections to the Kowalski family tree. He'd even changed his birthday by 2 days on all official documents, Margaret told me, probably so his biological family couldn't find him through public records. My grandfather's stroke had happened 3 months ago, and he still couldn't speak clearly. But one afternoon, while my father was at work, I brought the box to him. I didn't say anything, just opened it and spread the documents on the table beside his chair. Tears rolled down his weathered face. He pointed to a photo of Michael and Anna, young and smiling, holding a toddler version of my father. With his good hand, he made a gesture like he was trying to push something away. Then he pointed at my father's name on the adoption papers and shook his head sadly. You try to keep the connection, I said. It wasn't a question. He nodded, more tears falling. He picked up one of Margaret's returned letters, his hand shaking. Then he pointed at my father and made a cutting gesture. He cut them off himself. Another nod. My grandfather looked exhausted, defeated. I understood then that he'd kept these documents as evidence, as proof of what my father had done. Maybe he'd hoped to show him someday. Maybe he'd wanted someone else to know the truth. I couldn't keep silent anymore, but I also knew a direct confrontation would lead nowhere. My father was a master at deflection, at turning arguments around until you were the one apologizing. I needed to wait for the right moment. It came yesterday, during what should have been a casual Sunday dinner. My boyfriend James had joined us, and somehow the conversation turned to our future. We'd been dating for 2 years, and my father had been making increasingly pointed comments about marriage and grandchildren. When you two get married, my father said, cutting his steak with precise movements, I assume you'll keep the Ashford name. It's important for the children to have that connection to their heritage. James looked uncomfortable. We talked about this before. He didn't care about last names, would have been happy with whatever I chose. But my father's intensity on the subject had always made these conversations tense. Actually, I said carefully, I've been thinking about names a lot lately. My father smiled, assuming I was about to agree with him. Good. It's important to think about these things. Legacy matters. It does, I agree. That's why I've been researching our actual family legacy. Something flickered in his eyes. Wariness. What do you mean actual legacy? You know our family history. Doi. I set down my fork. My mother had gone quiet, sensing the shift in atmosphere. Tell me about the Ashford family business again, Dad. How many generations has it been in the family? 4 generations, he said automatically. My great-grandfather started it in 1923. That's interesting, I said, because I found documents that say you started the business in 1995 with money from an inheritance. An inheritance from Michael and Anna Kowalski. The color drained from his face. My mother looked confused, glancing between us. James reached under the table and squeezed my hand. I don't know what you're talking about, my father said, but his voice had gone thin. I found box, Dad, in Grandpa's attic. All the adoption papers, the estate settlement, the letters from your biological family. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Those documents are private. You had no right. I had every right, I said, standing to face him. You've spent my entire life lecturing me about family honor and legacy. You made Emily feel like a traitor for hyphenating her name. You've built this entire identity around being an Ashford, around this generational wealth and prestige. But it's all a lie. I'm an Ashford, he said, his voice rising. My parents raised me. They gave me their name. That makes me an Ashford. You're right, I said. They did raise you. They loved you. But that doesn't give you the right to erase Michael and Anna Kowalski. That doesn't justify cutting off your entire biological family. Those people tried for 30 years to maintain a connection with you, and you treated them like they didn't exist. My mother finally spoke. Richard, what is she talking about? What biological family? He turned to her, and I saw something crack in his expression. It doesn't matter. They're not important. The Ashfords are my real family. They send you birthday cards every year. I continued. Your Aunt Margaret saved a place for you at every family gathering. She wanted to tell you stories about your mother, and you filed a restraining order against her. She was harassing me. She was trying to give you a photo album. We were both shouting now. My mother had tears streaming down her face. James had quietly moved to stand beside me, a silent show of support. You used their money, I said, my voice dropping to something harder than a shout. Michael and Anna died, trying to give you a future, and you used their inheritance to build a business you claim is generational. You've been profiting off their deaths for 30 years while pretending they never existed. I built that business, he roared. I turned their money into something. I made it grow. I created the Ashford legacy. There is no Ashford legacy. I shouted back. There's just you, so ashamed of where you came from that you erased your own history. You're so obsessed with this fantasy of generational wealth and prestige that you threw away real family connections. He was breathing hard, his face red. You don't understand. You can't understand. When I was young, people looked down on me. Poor kid, orphan, adopted into a better family. I heard the whispers. I saw the pity in their eyes. I decided I would be more than that. I would be someone they had to respect. By lying? I asked. By cutting off everyone who knew the truth. By building something real, he said. By making the Ashford name mean something. It already meant something, I said quietly. Your parents loved you enough to adopt you, to give you their name, to raise you as their own. That meant something, but you were so busy trying to prove you belonged that you forgot to be grateful for it. He sank back into his chair, suddenly looking older. My mother moved to his side, her hand on his shoulder, though she was still crying. I talked to Margaret, I said. She told me about Michael and Anna. Your real parents. Did you know your father was a teacher? That your mother volunteered at a soup kitchen every Sunday? They weren't wealthy, but they were good people. They saved every penny to give you opportunities. And you spent your whole life acting like they never existed. Stop calling them my real parents, he said, but there was no energy in it. They are your real parents, I said. Just like the Ashfords are your real parents. You're allowed to have both. You're allowed to honor both. But instead, you chose to erase half of who you are. The silence that followed was heavy. Finally, my mother spoke. Richard, is this all true? He nodded slowly, not meeting her eyes. Why didn't you tell me? She asked. We've been married 35 years. I wanted to be someone you could be proud of, he said quietly. Someone with a real family, a real legacy. I fell in love with you, she said. Not your last name, not your family history. You. He broke then, really broke. 30 years of carefully constructed lies crumbling. He put his head in his hands and sobbed. My mother held him, and I felt a complicated mix of anger and pity. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red and swollen. What do you want from me? He asked. I want you to stop lying, I said. I want you to acknowledge where you came from. And I want you to know that when James and I get married, when we have kids, they're getting the name Kowalski. He flinched like I'd hit him. Why would you do that? Because Michael and Anna deserve to be remembered, I said. Because they gave everything to provide for a son they'd never see grow up. Because their family tried for 3 decades to maintain a connection you refused to give them. Someone should carry their name forward. Someone should honor their memory. That's not fair, he whispered. No, I agreed. What's not fair is that Margaret has spent 30 years grieving her sister and being rejected by her nephew. What's not fair is that you build an empire on their money while pretending they never exist. What's not fair is that you've made our entire family complicit in your life. I picked up my purse. James stood with me. I'm going to have a relationship with the Kowalski family, I said. Margaret invited me to a reunion next month. I'm going. You can come if you want, but I'm done protecting your secret. Everyone will know, he said desperately. Everyone will know I'm not really an Ashford. You are an Ashford, I said, but you're also a Kowalski. The sooner you accept that, the sooner you can stop living in fear of the truth. We left him there, still crying, my mother holding him. I felt drained, but also lighter, like I'd been carrying his secret without knowing it, and had finally set it down. James drove us home in silence. Finally, he said, are you okay? I don't know, I admitted. I just blew up my family. You told the truth, he corrected. That's different, is it? I asked. He's still my father. Despite everything, I love him, but I can't respect him anymore. How do you reconcile that? James didn't have an answer. Neither did I. That night, I called Margaret. I told her everything. She cried again, but this time with something that sounded like relief. Thank you, she kept saying. Thank you for remembering them. Thank you for caring. Tell me more about them, I asked. I want to know everything. She talked for 2 hours. About Anna's terrible singing voice and her even worse cooking. About Michael's dad jokes and his obsession with crossword puzzles. About how they'd met at a community theater production where they were both terrible actors but fell in love during rehearsals, about their tiny apartment filled with books and plants, about how excited they'd been when Anna got pregnant, how Michael had painted the nursery himself, getting more paint on himself than the walls. "Your father," Margaret said, and I heard the catch in her voice. He looked just like Michael. Same eyes, same smile. Anna used to say he had Michael's stubborn streak too. They love him so much. Their whole world revolved around that little boy. I looked at the photo she'd emailed me. My father as a toddler, sitting on Michael's shoulders, both of them laughing. Anna beside them, her hand reaching up to steady the child, her face radiant with joy. A family, whole and happy, frozen in a moment before tragedy struck. "I'll make sure people know their names, I promised. I'll make sure they're not forgotten." "You already have," Margaret said softly. "Just by asking about them, by wanting to know them, you've given them back their grandson. Even if Richard never comes around, you've given us that. The reunion is in 3 weeks." I've been in touch with dozens of Kowalski relatives, all eager to meet me, all grateful that someone from Richard's family is reaching out. They've sent photos, stories, recipes that Anna used to make. They've welcomed me with open arms. No questions asked, no grudges held. My father hasn't spoken to me since that dinner. My mother calls every few days, torn between supporting her husband and acknowledging the truth. Emily called me crying, saying she'd always felt something was off about Dad's obsession with the family name, and now it all made sense. I don't know if my father will ever accept what I've done. I don't know if he'll ever acknowledge the Kowalskis, ever apologize to Margaret, ever admit that his legacy was built on someone else's sacrifice. But I know I did the right thing, because legacy isn't about names or money or prestige. It's about the people who came before us, the sacrifices they made, the love they gave. Michael and Anna Kowalski deserve better than to be erased. They deserve to be remembered, honored, celebrated. And now they will be. Every time someone asks about my name, I'll tell them about the teacher and the nurse who died too young, who loved their son enough to provide for a future they'd never see. I'll tell them about the family that never gave up trying to reach him. I'll tell them about the inheritance that built an empire but cost a man his history. My children will know their great-grandparents' names. They'll see the photos, hear the stories, understand where they came from. They'll know that family isn't just about blood or names or money. It's about remembering. It's about honoring the people who made you possible. That's the real legacy. That's what actually matters. And if my father can't see that, if he's so wrapped up in his manufactured identity that he can't acknowledge the truth, then that's his loss. But it won't be mine. It won't be my children's. The Kowalski name will live on. Michael and Anna will be remembered. And maybe, someday, my father will realize that he didn't have to choose between being an Ashford and being a Kowalski. He could have been both. He could have honored all of his family, all of his history, all of the people who loved him. But he chose fear instead. He chose shame. He chose to erase rather than embrace. I am choosing differently. I'm choosing truth even when it's hard. I'm choosing connection even when it's complicated. I'm choosing to honor all of my family, not just the parts that sound prestigious. That's my legacy. That's what I'll pass down to my children. Not a lie about generational wealth, not an obsession with a name, but the truth about where we came from and the people who made us possible. Michael and Anna Kowalski, a teacher and nurse. Not wealthy, not famous, but good people who love their son and try to give him a future. They deserve to be remembered, and now they will be. If you enjoyed this story, like and subscribe for more true family stories that will make you question everything you thought you knew.